Hola, amigos, amigas, players, playerettes, dudettes, and everybody in between, up, down, left, and right. Welcome back. This is going to be can you believe it's going to be episode 72 of Game of Crimes? And I
have
am
it down
Morgan
as
Wright.
episode 71.
What's that?
I have it down as episode 71.
Well, let's just go to the list. No, Derek Maltz was episode 71.
No, he was episode 70 on my list.
Episode 70 was Kevin Holland.
No,
All you
that
have
was
to do is you have to
69.
go look at what I put out. Go look at what it says on iTunes.
Okay, go ahead.
You missed one. Now you've run the whole intro.
No, that makes it funny.
Well, as you can see, Murph's always off by a little bit.
I even use my fingers and my toes to count. I still don't know where I just missed something.
I have the master list, Murph. Go on to Google Drive. I put the master list there.
All right.
Anyway, we digress. That's your first digression. We haven't even gotten into the podcast yet. So.
It's going to be a good one.
Going to be a good one. All right. Well, according to the script, it says housekeeping. So quick housekeeping. Go to Apple, go to Spotify. They've got that thing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. Hit those. It really helps us out a lot. Head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We got some good stuff over there. Anytime somebody has a book out there, we put stuff, we put pictures there, our merch is there. Follow us on that thing called the social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. But Murph, I'm going to ask you this. You probably don't see this coming, right? Where do you got to be? I mean, it's Friday. We're recording. Where do you got to be on every day of the week that ends in Y?
Well, this weekend on Saturday, you have to be in front of your TV watching college football. Go Mountaineers! They beat Baylor last night. Yay! So, but on the podcast, you need to come and check us out on Patreon. We've got a lot of extra episodes, a lot of bonus material over there that you're not going to hear on the regular podcast show. It's everything from our Q&A to our movie ratings to you can't make this shit up to 911. What's your emergency? Or as I like to say, 119. There's a ton of stuff on there. We have more on there than we have on our regular podcast, whether it's 71 or 72 episodes. So come and check us out and see what you think.
Yeah, that's why Murph never stopped counting. I got 9 fingers. Jeez, look at that. Yeah, but seriously, we got some good stuff over there. And for this special episode we're going to be recording today, if you can't make this shit up, my oldest sister has officially retired. And so we brought her out here. She is going to be sitting in the studio with me and Murph as we record this. So we will actually have our first, in a sense, live audience.
And we're going to find out some stuff about Mr. Morgan that y'all don't know. So come on over and check it out.
I can edit everything out. All right. So, hey, guys, and if you're just feeling like a quick pause for the cause, paypal.com. Just use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com. Now, let's get this thing started.
Let's go.
All right. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We state this, according to law, federal law, United States Code Title 22.4/5, we have to take the story seriously. But
if you haven't figured it out already, we never take ourselves serious.
And one of the ways we don't take our serious is what, Murph? Guess what time it is? Guess what time it is? I'll ask you one more time. Guess what time it is?
It's time for Small Town Police Blotter.
Da-da-da-da-da. And I've got one blotter thing, but I've got a couple headlines that are just they speak for themselves. But let's kick this off first, right? Murph, at 8:34 a.m., deputies were called to a report of fraud. Fraud, can you believe it, in the 14,000 block of Root County Road 7 near Yampa, wherever the hell that is. A man reported purchasing a donkey from a person on Craigslist, and the man was upset because he thought the Craigslist description was not an accurate representation of the donkey. Deputies referred him to civil court.
Let's see, did he have big ears? He got 4 legs, a tail, and he goes, what?
What did he try to do, pass off a really big cat as a donkey? I don't know.
I thought maybe you were going to talk about that lady that went to McDonald's, couldn't get her chicken nuggets.
Which, by the way, if you were on Patreon, that would be one of our... We did a hilarious version this time of stupid 911 calls, and that was... By the way, we're going to have to report out on the results of that. We actually have our poll done, so we actually decided which one was the funniest and which one was the stupidest.
Ah, very good.
Yeah, so we'll have to report back on that. All right, Murph, a couple quick ones, too. Headlines. You know, sometimes these folks in small towns, they need to reread their headlines. All right. The section is police firing courts. Murph, man shot twice in 1 week, says someone is out to kill him.
Well, according to that headline, he's right.
Oh,
unbelievable.
a man shot for the second time in a week told police someone is trying to kill him, but he doesn't know why. They found the 26-year-old victim the second time lying on the porch suffering from 2 bullet wounds, one to his right foot, the other his left leg. He was riding a bicycle through the alley when he was shot. Good, dude.
Was it the same alley both times he got stopped going in that damn alley?
Quit going in the alley or quit pissing people off. I don't know. Man shot twice in 1 week, says someone out to kill him. There is your obvious headline of the...
He's a rocket scientist.
This one we should have called ATF in on this next headline, Murph.
Okay. Bill Sarukas, here you go, brother.
No, different one. Maybe a Dominic Polifrone or a Lou Velozzi.
Oh, gotcha.
Federal agents raid gun shop, find weapons.
Whoa. Who would have ever thunk it?
Who would have known? Is that where you go look for guns? I had no idea until today. If you wanted to find guns, you had to go raid a gun shop.
We got to call Lou Velozzi.
We got to check this out.
Might not be aware. Hell, it's probably one of his undercover ops. And if you wonder what we're talking about, go check out his interview on
episode 4.
Wow. I didn't realize it's been that long since we had Lou on here.
And then we had the Chrisser on, and we've had Dominic Polifrone on, and who else from ATF? Oh, Jay Dobbins.
Jay Dobbins, yeah.
Jay Bird, yeah.
Chris Bayless. We've had some good people from ATF on here.
Yeah, great stories. But Steve, just in case you were wondering, if you want to find guns, where are you going to raid?
A gun store.
A gun shop. Da-da-da-da. Hey, and kind of a little deviation from our small town police blotter for today, but I thought, hey, we just might read the most obvious headlines.
Unbelievable.
Like there's a couple out there like death is a leading natural, cause of death, or people dying, it's just like teen pregnancy, winds down after age 25. No kidding. One of the other ones I saw.
All right.
Okay. Well, thus endeth the reading for today. Which is good because the next part, we kind of had fun with our next guy, Nathan Hutchinson.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a story. This is a story like we now have the honor of having 2 people who have received the highest awards that you can get from Congress and from the president for bravery and for actions, and going above and beyond the call of duty. Mm-hmm. So Nathan, how do we come across Nathan? I think this was somebody you had an intro to.
Yeah, somebody introduced us to him. A good friend of mine in Oklahoma. Yeah. So it's I've spoken at a conference out there, and he was aware of our podcast and listened. So thank you, brother.
And we get a lot of good interviews that way too. And so Nathan, here's the interesting thing about this. When you talk to the guy now, he's fun, he's unassuming, but man, when you listen to this story, and we don't want to go too much into the story, but this is a guy lost one of his partners in the shootout. He was shot 4 times. He was shot twice, got people to safety. Even though being shot twice, he went to get his partner.
Yeah.
You'd leave nobody behind.
Unbelievable. You want to meet a stud? That's who we're going to interview today, man. This guy put his own life in jeopardy. Just like you said, man, he put his team members' lives ahead of his own. And he suffered for it. I mean, it ended up costing his career, and I won't tell you more than that because we want you to hear the story from him. And by the way, that's what makes us different from most true crime podcasts is we don't tell you the story. We let the heroes tell you their story themselves.
That's a good distinction right there. It's like, there's people who read the book and people who wrote the book, literally and figuratively. We bring on the people who wrote the book. They were their first person accounts. You won't get this anywhere else. But Murph, we will not hear Nathan Hutchinson's story and what he did unless I ask you the one question. Are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all? The headline-friendly, obvious statement game of crimes.
Hey, for all our listeners, get in. Sit down, shut up, hold on, and listen. I mean, listen, put yourself in Nate's shoes and see if you think you could do that. Bring on Nate Hutchinson, our hero of the day.
All right, people, welcome back. This is going to be yet another. This is a good. We like these survivor stories. We like talking to people who have done their duty, done their job, have things happen to them that do not happen to a lot of people, but when they do, we want survivors. We want to hear their stories. And this one's a great story too. So from the great state of Utah, which is changing in some areas as we talked about, but the great state of Utah from Ogden, we got with us Nate Hutchinson. Nate, welcome to this thing we call Game of Crimes.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
How you say that now, you may change your mind. Hang on, pal.
Yeah, just wait. He's going to tick you off before the day's over. I promise.
Most likely, yeah.
And here's the cool thing about the people that we bring on that have these survival stories. They're survival stories, and then there are people that go above and beyond. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I can't wait to get this story. I've read about it. We did a preliminary interview on the phone. Nate and I did. We didn't get any details, but from what I've read, you got one hell of a story, brother.
Yeah, it was a crazy day for sure.
But we're not going to get there yet, are we, Morgan?
No, we're not, because we got to talk about this thing of ours called Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours. So we got to tell you, we got to ask you, Nate, how did you get involved in this? So was it family, friends? You'd lose a bet? Decide to apply for law enforcement. So, kind of where did you start off at? How did you get into this?
I was one of those guys that wanted to be in law enforcement ever since I can remember. As long as I can remember, that was it. That was the only thing I was going to do. No one was going to change my mind. I even go back. It's funny. My mom still has it. They make these little poster boards when you're in kindergarten, and you're supposed to kind of like introduce yourself and what's your favorite food and, all that type of stuff. And what do you want to be when you grow up? And my mom still has it. She shows it to me, but it's, it said I want to be a police officer. So that was it. My path was set. There was no other option for me. I don't have any family in it. In fact, they were quite a bit opposed to it, but that was me. I was just going to do it.
Well, why were they opposed to it?
My dad, I grew up in Utah. My dad, not that, he's stand-up guy, never really been in trouble, but when he was in high school, he was probably one of those guys that ran from the cops. He always tells me stories about being in the 60s and he's like, yeah, they used to chase me and I would run and we would be in chases and, he was kind of a motorcycle guy in the 60s, big into motorcycles. And so he just, he would always be like, I don't know why you want to do that lights and woo woo. That's what he always say. Lights and woo woo. And so, he was always like, you need to get a good government job, a good, cause they work on, up on base. They worked at there's a local Air Force base here. And, they had very successful careers doing that. And he's like, that's what you need to do. You need to get into that, make some money, blah, blah, blah. Don't become a cop.
And you listened.
Yeah, I listened real well. You can.
As kids always do to their parents, I listened. I took their advice. So,
yeah.
So that kind of stuck with you. So, what'd you do after high school then?
So when I graduated high school, again, the entire focus was I just wanted to get into law enforcement. So the funny thing is I started, different little odds and ends security jobs, and I got a job working for Sears in their loss prevention department. And, believe it or not, that was actually a hell of a fun job. We just wore regular clothes and would walk around the store, and catch shoplifters, and completely different time than it is now because, it was totally encouraged. Like, they're like, do whatever you got to do. Get those guys. Don't let them get away with anything.
Kick their butts.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, did you ever have to get into an altercation with a shoplifter?
Yeah. Honestly, that was like a weekly event. And that kind of set the stage. For me, it taught me a lot of lessons because, these shoplifters would come in, they had no respect. We weren't police. We weren't anything like that. So they could care less who they were. So they would either try to run or fight. And I became kind of well known with the Ogden Police Department because they were always responding
now, wait a minute. You were well known because they go, there's that pain in the ass Nate again. Just add more paperwork for me to do.
The funny thing is so I actually started my career in Ogden, but we'll get to that. But the guy, they had a system back then, and they called it, I don't know what it was officially called, but the line guys called it the Golden Boy. And they would go off of your stats, and the higher producers had a better they could pick their shifts and their schedules and things like that for the following year. And so some of the guys would come in and they'd be like, you made me golden boy again this year because you're catching so many people, I'm getting so many arrests.
You're a stat machine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When I became a city police officer, this was back in 1975 in a little southern town of Bluefield, West Virginia, there was a guy that I went to college with, Dave Williams. We took our first police test together, but before he got hired, he was working at a little small, almost like a neighborhood grocery store in downtown Bluefield. And boy, I tell you what, he was just like you. He was dead on those shoplifters, and he would chase them down. He was fast. He was a smaller guy, but very wiry. Talk a million miles an hour. And he was the same way, everybody in the police department knew Dave because he was always chasing somebody down. I don't think anybody ever got away.
Yeah, that was kind of me. I loved it. I mean, I'm 18, 19 years old, and to me, this was like, I don't know, they were paying me like $7 an hour, but I was like, this is the job. Like, until I'm 21 and can actually be a cop, like, I don't think there's anything better.
Oh, he was a heck of a so we took our first police test together. I went to the city, he went to the county. Then he did a few years there, and then he moved down to Charleston, South Carolina Police Department. Made a name for himself down there in the violent crimes section. I think ended up in several shootings. Had to pop a couple guys, and then he went to DEA, and that's kind of where I got my motivation to go to DEA. Another guy introduced me to DEA, Pete Ramey, and then when I found out that's what Dave was doing, that was my go-to. Man, tell me about it. And to this day, we're still friends. So it's
that's awesome.
But it's funny. That's how it starts, with that grocery store chasing down them shoplifters.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. It was really funny back then. So, and it makes for good war stories down the road too.
It does. Yeah, I have some crazy stories, from back in those days.
Back in the day. See, it's like, again, Cosa Nostra. Back in the day.
Yeah.
So how long did you do this loss prevention thing with Sears?
Till I turned 21, and I was eligible to go to the police academy. So from about 18 to 21, so 3 years.
Okay. And during that time, how many shoplifters do you think that you nabbed, that you apprehended?
Oh, shoot. Now we're going back. I mean,
you're not that old, dude. Come on.
Yeah, just 45. I feel older, but I guess that's what getting shot does to you. But we would average about 300 a year.
Oh.
So yeah, just about one a day.
That's what I was going to say. One a day. Holy cow.
Yeah. And so, probably altogether 800-900.
So that's the ones you caught. For everyone you caught, how many do you think got away?
Oh, I bet. I bet it's like 10 to 1 that we're catching.
Now, did you deal with any of the organized retail theft gangs, the ones that they've got a whole operation to do this?
Yeah, we did. There's kind of two categories. We would deal with kind of the local organized ones, and they were a lot more street gangs and stuff, and they were organized. They'd come in, and typically they'd pull right up to the curb. They'd run in, 4 or 5 of them, grab as much stuff as they could in just a short amount of time and jump back in the car. But then we would also deal with like traveling ones that would go around the country and just kind of professional shoplifters, and we would deal with those as well.
Where's the wackiest place you ever found merchandise?
Obviously everyone shoves it down their pants, shoves it down their shirt. And, women come out of a dressing room and they look like, they just gained 40 pounds. And you're like, well, where'd all the clothes go?
And you definitely don't say to a woman, does this dress make me look fat? I am not answering that one.
Exactly.
That dress doesn't make you look fat, but the 10 others you have underneath that definitely do.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to learn to dodge these, got to see these things coming. So now, where did you apply at? Did you apply multiple places or just one?
So in Utah back then, it's changed a little bit now, but back then you kind of had to self-sponsor yourself through the police academy. There was so many applicants for the few positions that were available. They were only hiring people that were already sponsored. So Utah has different police academies located throughout the state, and it generally cost about $5,000, and you had to pay that up front yourself. Go to school, and then from school, once you graduated, then you'd start applying and get picked up.
So Nate, what's the whole purpose behind that? Why do you make somebody go pay for an academy then go look for a job? Is that just to weed, people who aren't serious about it out? But that's $5,000 is still a lot of money to come up with when you're trying to find a job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was just the demand. I mean, you had so many people applying for the few positions that there was. Like the first time I tested at the Ogden Police Department. They had 5 openings for the year, and they had 450 applicants show up for those 5 positions. So I think it was just one of those where they didn't have to pay people. They didn't have to pay the academy, pay wages and things like that. They could select people that were already certified and ready to go. So it was, I think, a financial decision.
What year was that?
That would have been 99.
Yeah, I can guarantee you that ain't the same way now. A lot of people are struggling to find people to hire, aren't they?
Oh, Utah. Yeah, Utah is the same. You can't get anyone. I mean, they're offering all kinds of bonuses. We're offering people $5,000 just to sign on, stuff like that. They don't have to do that anymore. Certainly the pendulum's changed.
Yeah, it's as they say, there's buyer's market, and seller's market. Yeah, so the market has definitely changed. So were you successful your first time applying?
Yeah, so I went through the academy. I had to work during the days because I'm paying for this myself. When you're 21 years old. I mean, back then $5,000 is a ton of money. So I'm working during the day and going to school at night. So generally my schedule was I'd get up to go to work at about 4:30 in the morning. I'd work till about 4 in the afternoon. Come home, quick shower. And then head off to the police academy, and that'd go till about 11 at night, and then all day on Saturday. Took about 9 months, 10 months to graduate, and then from there you start applying. I kind of was excited. I was ready to go, so I started applying when I was in the academy still, hoping to get through the testing process because it takes so long to go through the whole testing process. I was hoping to be able to have a job when I graduated, which I did.
So, and the agency you applied with was?
So I applied all over the state, honestly, and I applied specifically for the Ogden City Police Department, and then the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. And funny thing is I come home from work one day, and I have a letter in the mail, and it says, "Hey," it's from the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. Says, "Hey, we'd like to offer you a position." And as I'm reading that and kind of celebrating, because again, it was very, very, very competitive to get in on anywhere. And I'm celebrating, I'm excited, and then the phone rings, and it's the assistant chief at Ogden, and he's like, "Hey, we'd like to offer you a position at Ogden City." I'm like, "Wow, I got my choice," kind of the buyer's market, like you say.
Yeah.
So decided to go to Ogden City. Ultimately, that's where I went.
Why?
Salt Lake County was going to make me move. They wanted me to move to Salt Lake County, and for what they were paying back then versus what housing was, I'd never be able to afford it. Ogden City was kind of my hometown. I knew some guys there. Like I say, I had made friends with guys from my days working shoplifters. So ultimately, that's kind of the reason, and I ended up going to Ogden City.
So give us a little bit of details now on the area. So, Ogden City, first of all, how big's the county, and then how big's the city?
So Weber County, everyone always calls it Weber, but we call
It's
it
Weber?
Weber. Yeah, Weber County.
Well, then why don't you spell it Weber, like Weeber?
Yeah.
Like the
Justin
grill.
Bieber. Is it was it named after Justin Bieber? Weber?
I don't know. Originally it's kind of a cool history, and I can get into that too. But to answer your question, we're about 25 minutes north of Salt Lake City. Population is roughly 300,000 now. Back then it was probably closer to about 225. Ogden City's the county seat. Ogden's a really cool history, Old West, a lot of Old West history there. So yeah, about 25 minutes north of Salt Lake.
And but you'd grown up in Utah your whole life. So like this was like, I mean, you were staying in the area, you were staying home.
Yeah, I was. And like Ogden, was the city I grew up in. So it was kind of cool to get hired there. That's kind of where I wanted to work. Ultimately, I wanted to work for the sheriff's office, and that's where I ended up going after a couple of years. But yeah, Ogden.
So why'd you want to work for the sheriff's office? You could have taken the position originally and saved yourself the 2 years.
Well, they didn't. So again, back then it was so hard to get hired. The sheriff's office would only hire someone once every couple of years,
Okay.
and so that's where I wanted to go, but they weren't hiring at that time. So started with Ogden and eventually went to the sheriff's office, and that was kind of my goal was the sheriff's office.
So you do your 2 years in Ogden. What kind of describe Ogden for us in terms of what kind of crimes, what kind of a city is it what kind of things were you dealing with on a regular basis?
Ogden's a blue collar town. It's cool. The history of Ogden is, so back in 1869, you had the Transcontinental Railroad where they wanted to connect the East Coast to the West Coast by rail. And so they started the two competing railroads were competing to make that happen. You had the Northern Pacific and then the Central Pacific coming from California. Well, they met right outside of Ogden back in May of 1969. And they call that area the Golden Spike because once the two railroads met, then they drove in that Golden Spike. And Ogden became a hub. If you were coming from the east or leaving the west to go to the east, you had to go through Ogden. It was the junction city. Ogden was the junction of the railroad. I think the next one was in Nebraska. So Ogden really kind of became this blue collar town. You had a lot of the cowboys and ranchers and anyone that needed to use the rail yards to ship anything. And of course that brought crime with it as well. I mean, people leaving east or running from the law, whatever, they're going to pass through Ogden. So that's kind of been the history of Ogden. Utah was obviously settled by the Mormons and Brigham Young and Salt Lake City and so forth. But Ogden's a little bit more blue collar, has always maintained that flavor.
Oh, cool. And it's good that you know the history too. It's like, it's a lot of people go to work in areas say, "Hey, I knew about this." I go, I didn't, but it's like, but it's good to know that it's good
Yeah.
to know the town because that kind of becomes that's kind of how you police the town too. What's been our history? What's been our culture?
Yeah.
So for that 2 years, did you just stay in patrol or did you move up out of patrol?
No, I just stayed in patrol those 2 years. I kind of had a goal. I wanted to be in patrol for a while until I kind of, cut my teeth a little bit. And especially back then, I mean, you really had to earn any type of a specialty. So I did my 2 years at Ogden. Eventually a position opened at the sheriff's office and I applied and got that.
Did you have to start in the jail?
No, they had openings in the jail, and a lot of the people I went to the academy with jumped on those. But I never had an interest, in working in the jail. I always wanted to work the streets. That was kind of always my thing.
Oh, cool. So, now was it were you able to get hired? Like you say, they didn't hire very often. Was it because you had the experience and also had been through the academy? Obviously, that had to be a help.
Yeah, the sheriff's office wouldn't hire anyone that hadn't been through the academy. They wouldn't sponsor anyone through the academy. So yeah, it helped, and again, it was super competitive. I think for that position, they had one opening, and I believe they had like 200 something applicants when I applied. So you really, they were just weeding everyone out any way they could, and you just had to rise to the top any way you could.
So, so when you got hired, did they send you through a mini academy, to teach you their own ways, or did you just go through an FTO program of training office,
Yeah, so
field training officer, and hit the street?
yep, I did the field training. So the same thing with Ogden. Did a field training in Ogden, then got out on my own. Came over to the sheriff's office. Did a field training. Originally was scheduled for the entire time, but after a couple of weeks, they were like, "All right, you know what you're doing. We're just gonna cut you loose now."
Turn you loose upon the public. So, and the
Exactly.
first thing you did was first thing you went to was you went to Sears and said, "Hey, toss me a couple of arrests. I got to get my stats up."
Exactly. No, I when I was the sheriff's office was a good FTO. It was kind of different because I had a lot of experience. So the guys even treated me different. They knew who I was. But when I was brand new at Ogden going through FTO and you're first put out on the streets, I mean it's a crazy different life than what you were leading before. And I kind of knew I was going to have one of those crazy careers because my first call off FTO was a burglary in progress, and actual people in the home, So, I mean, that was my very first call right out of briefing on my
Now, you
first
said
day.
people in the home. Was it the people who belonged in the home, or was it the
No,
actual burglar?
there was a group of them. There was 4 burglars in the home. So when I got there, I'm talking to the neighbor. He had called it in. He said, "Hey, I'm asked to watch my house. The neighbors are out of town, and I just watched these guys go through the window." And I'm like, "Are they still in there?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're still in there." So he had a key, gave me a key. I'm young and don't know any better, so I'm not waiting for my backup. So I go in the house. I'm calling out. I
Nate.
know,
Oh
I
my!
know.
Every FTO is sitting out here going, "Oh,
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, found them hiding in the house.
They didn't try and run?
No, they didn't try to run. They just scattered in the house. I remember the first one. I was walking through the house and there's a bedroom door and it's slightly open, and I go to push it to open it, and I'm just reaching with my hand to push it, and it opens slightly and then bounces back, and I'm like, I know someone's hiding behind that door.
Now, were these kids or were they adults?
Young adults, like 18 to 20.
Who hopefully picked another career path after this encounter.
Yeah, they weren't the best. They weren't the best burglars, that's for sure.
Well, you couldn't have had more than probably 2 sets of handcuffs on you. So what'd you do?
I did. I got the 2, and then by then my backup guys had arrived. So
Okay.
I was just young. I was eager. I was wanting to show that I could do this, that I could catch these guys.
Now, did you get your ass reamed out by your supervisor?
I did. Yeah, absolutely.
I knew that was coming.
Did you have a radio on you, a portable?
I did. Yeah, yep, we had portable radios, just a handheld, and
Did
I told them.
when you captured the first one, did you radio in that you've got someone in custody?
Yeah, I did, and everyone was like, "Hold on, we're coming! Wait,
Yeah.
wait!"
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm already in here getting them."
Oh, that escalates everything too. The responders.
Oh, it does, man. I can just see some sergeant vein popping out. Let me tell you, you don't do that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. I can totally. Later down the road when I was promoted to sergeant and different things, I look back on some of the shit that I did, and I'm just like, dang, I would have hated me as a patrol officer.
Morgan, we just did we have a Patreon channel also, and we do a monthly thing called Q&A where our subscribers can ask us any question they want. One of the questions they asked today, right before we did your interview, is there anything in your career that you would have done over? This would have been a great one to have, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
What is the proper answer for your promotion test? Wait for backup, secure the area, and and don't become a target.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just for our listeners, just so you know, I mean, to us this is obvious, but you don't know if those people in there are armed or not.
Yeah,
some
exactly.
Some of our listeners may be thinking, well, hey, he's a police officer. That's what he gets paid to do. Well, yeah, you do, but you don't get paid to go in there and risk your life like that.
Right. Yeah. Totally stupid. Totally. Again,
I wouldn't say that.
You put these. You're essentially still a young guy and put out on patrol, and sometimes it's a sink or swim. You just gotta learn. You make mistakes and learn from them.
You thought you were invincible.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yep.
10 feet tall,
I might have been there.
We all were there.
Yep.
So we've now determined that you have now given Sergeant some heartaches and some headaches, and now you're moving on to some other areas. So tell us the difference in size between Ogden City and Salt Lake in terms of the population and the kind of like the area you were covering.
Size-wise, Ogden, Weber County is bigger than Salt Lake County. I think it's about 652 square miles for Weber County. Salt Lake's probably a little over half that size, but population-wise, they have quite a bit more. I don't know exactly their latest figures, but I think overall Salt Lake County is probably closer to 1 million people in that county.
Right. So Nate, as with all guys, everybody compares sizes. So Weber County was twice the size of Salt Lake, but from obviously difference in population. Now, one thing I want to ask you about is when you were on the street in Ogden, how many people would you have out on the street at a time in Ogden versus how many would you have out when you were at Salt Lake?
So Weber, or I wasn't ever at Salt Lake. I never ended up.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Down there. But the way that they do the shifts in Ogden, they do 10-hour shifts, and the city's separated into 8 sections. So you have one officer assigned to one of those sections. So each shift would have 8 on. Day shift typically ran from 6 to 4. They didn't have, it was just them. But starting at about 3, you started to get a swing shift on. Another swing shift came on at 5. And then you have a graveyard shift come on at 9. So depending on the time of day, you'd have anywhere from and that's just patrol guys, not counting detectives or any of the other specialties. But you'd have anywhere from 8 to 30.
Man. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I said Salt Lake. I didn't mean to say that. You were in Weber County.
Yeah.
Yeah. Named for Justin Bieber. We determined that. So
exactly. And then Weber County for patrol, they work 12-hour shifts, and typically you'd have between 10 to 12 on each shift. And then they would just rotate. You'd have a day shift and you had a graveyard shift.
So, obviously you got a lot of folks out there on the street like that. So let's start talking about how you now moved up. So what's the structure in the sheriff's office that says if you want to move up out of patrol, move up to the next slot? I mean, are you looking to stay in patrol and go into investigations, or are you looking to get promoted and stay in patrol? Kind of what's your career, what's your glide path during those first few years?
Well, the first few years I was just looking to kind of learn the job, learn the gig. And so for the first couple of years, that's all I was interested in was just working patrol. Ultimately, my goal was always to get into investigations, and specifically I wanted to get into narcotics. That was even
Why?
I don't know. It's the same thing as wanting to be a cop. It's just that's what I wanted to do as a little kid. That's what I wanted to do. I would tell everyone, that's what I wanted to do, some sort of undercover work, and everyone would kind of just laugh and be like, whatever. But that's what I wanted to do. That was my goal. That was just always what I wanted to do.
Did you ever have was there ever an incident that with narcotics or drugs, or like you had a friend that OD'd, or you saw something bad happen that affected you, that made you think that way? Or was it just like you're saying when you were a little kid, nope, here's what career day, I want to be a cop?
Yeah, that's it. It was just career days. Never had an incident. If there was anything, it was probably 80s movies. Watching all those 80 movies with the plainclothes cops.
Don't tell me you watched Miami Vice.
I did watch a little Miami Vice.
There you go. Now you're talking. How about Hill Street Blues?
I watched Hill Street Blues as well as a kid. There was another one called Hunter. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I remember Hunter. Fred Dreyer, I think it was.
Yeah, the ex-football player. So we had a competing thing in the neighborhood of all the kids in the neighborhood, which was better, Miami Vice or Hunter. And I was always a staunch Miami Vice guy.
Yeah, me too.
Murph couldn't pull it off though. He tried wearing the fancy clothes and driving the fancy cars, and it didn't.
I couldn't find anybody give me a free silk T-shirt or silk shirt like they wear. I mean,
if it's free, it's for me.
This is another free shirt, by the way, from
Bootsy and Sal. Yeah, Lou, our buddy. Yeah. So, God, Murph and his free stuff. Anyway, I have a new thing for you, Murph. You're going to start running a charity to where you start giving away all your free stuff.
No, then I wouldn't have anything to wear.
I know you're going to have to buy stuff, you cheap bastard. So you can pay for your pool. But that was our first digression. So we have a drinking game. So anytime I say, back to our regularly scheduled podcast, but I digress, you get to take a shot. So everybody, if you're out there, take a shot. So Nate, back to our regularly scheduled podcast with you. So kind of tell us about the difference between working in the city versus working in the county. Were the crimes the same? The pace the same? What was different?
Ogden was a little bit more fast-paced. A lot more calls, a lot more volume coming in from Ogden itself. The county, in terms of calls, didn't have generally as many. But the cool thing is, and I kind of got a mix of both. So when I was in Ogden, you handle so many calls. They were always like, hey, 1 year of work in Ogden is equivalent to 5 years in a lot of other places, just simply because of the call volume. I mean, we ran our asses off nonstop. Then the cool thing about the county is because they didn't have the same call volume, those guys were incredible at stirring the pot and going out and finding their own things, like, self-initiated type of patrol work. And when I transferred over, those guys were just fantastic at that. And so kind of was able to learn both, had a ton of experience handling calls, but then learned how to really go out and stir the pot and find your own stuff to
We
get
call
it.
it, how do you go out and start shit? There's a professional shit starter. You go out
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
it's being proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have no choice to be reactive when you're handling call to call to call, but then there's some people, if there were no calls going on, they weren't doing anything. You had to drive up and check their pulse to make sure they were still,
Mm-hmm.
alive on duty. It's like, dude, you could be out, like your car can move. You know that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The parking lot, they guard in the parking lots.
And like Murph guarding trains, not a train, not one train was stolen.
Darn right. Right. I should have got a bonus for that, shouldn't I?
You should have got, yeah. If somebody can steal a train, I'm going to take that guy. I'm going to buy that guy a drink. So
Yeah.
It's
More
like
power
hitting
to
him with
him.
a stick. It's like hitting him with a stick, and they're like, "What'd you just do?"
what was the prevalent type of crime in Weber County that guys were dealing with on a routine basis? Was it drugs? Was it violence? Was it burglary? What was it?
It's pretty much everything. Ogden City had a lot of the violence. Domestic violences were very high. A lot of drugs there as well. Ogden is a hub for the Sinaloa cartel. One of the main smuggling routes comes up through Salt Lake and Ogden, and then kind of splinters off to the rest of the country. Montana and the Dakotas and things like that. So we had a lot of drugs we would deal with. A lot of fights, a lot of domestic violence, that type of stuff.
I had no
Wow.
idea about that Sinaloa connection. Holy cow!
Yeah, I mean, you got to have transportation routes, right? So were any of your guys working interdiction out on the highways?
Yeah, so the state troopers would always work interdiction, but specifically for Weber County, they have a narcotic strike force, and there would be guys in there that were specializing in interdiction. So Utah, has a main interstate that runs all the way from California, San Diego, all the way up through, and so that's kind of one of the main corridors, one of the pipelines, I think, that's bringing it up, and while Ogden area and Salt Lake area is a hub. So yeah, there was a lot of interdiction works, but we also had the trains, and then Ogden has a small airport, and so there was interdiction work done out of that as well.
So when did you start getting the chance to move out of patrol and up into doing the things that you wanted to do?
So my first opportunity, they had an opening, and they had this little unit called the community resource officers. The sheriff's, and this was at the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office contracts with numerous cities in Weber County to do the law enforcement for them. Some of these cities just don't have the size or whatever to have their own police departments, or they found it was cheaper to contract with the sheriff's office. So we had 9 different contract cities that we would work, and this community resource unit. Typically, when I first started, it was a bunch of kind of the retired on duty guys. They would go to the city council meetings and just kind of be there and handle little small city issues. But I saw some potential there. I saw some potential because those guys weren't tied to their radios. They weren't having to handle calls. So there was a bunch of my buddies and I that we started talking, and we're like, we ought to put in for that, and we ought to kind of change that unit. And instead of just being there for the little mayor type stuff, and we could really do some proactive self-initiated stuff and not have to handle calls anymore and really get out and stir the pot. And so that's what we did, and we put in for it, and we got it, and everyone was laughing at us. They're like, why do you young guys want to go to this old unit? And we're like, because we got a plan. And so there was 3 of us that went, and we kind of changed the way that they did it, and we just had a lot of fun. We were able to go out, hunt dope, hunt stuff like that.
Yeah, but there's a danger with that too, because now you've upended the cushy little job a lot of these guys
Oh
have.
yeah.
Now
Yeah, we
somebody's
did.
going to expect the next people to show up to be, hey, why can't you be like Nate and go out and arrest somebody? Well,
Yeah.
because, I was just going to go to tea with the mayor and we were just going to discuss, fishing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that did happen. But it
How
was
did the
fun.
community? How did the community take it when you had these new whippersnappers, these young kids coming in and now starting to turn things over and stir things up? How did the community react to that?
I think they actually liked it. I still, I'm an old school cop. That's the way I am, and I still think the public wants that. They want guys that are out doing shit that they shouldn't be doing. They want to see those guys get the handcuffs slapped on them.
Yeah, and they, I think communities aren't looking for somebody. You got to have the traffic units, but they're not looking, to be recognized as a radar ticket city. That's all you go 5 miles over the speed limit, you're going to get a speeding ticket. And I'm not putting down traffic cops because there's jackass. They're here in Orlando. I wish they had a lot more traffic units, especially out where we live in the middle of the night, because you can hear them out here drag racing and spinning their tires. And
exactly,
it's wide open here, but you're out there actually doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and I think that's what the public wants. I mean, I think there's still a silent majority of people that's what they're hoping for. They want to be able to go to bed and wake up and not have their shit stolen off their porch and their car's still there.
Well, if Murph had his shit stolen, it'd be hard to put a value on it. What's the value of it? I don't know. I got it for free. We can't put a value.
Hey, you take my free T-shirts, we're going to fight.
That's right.
Might be one-sided, but we're going to fight.
Well, the other thing, too, is you mentioned the narcotics strike force, the Weber County, you had an area. So how did being the community services officer lead you into then that next part of that? So what kind of stuff did you get yourself in now that you got this, now that you started saying, hey, let's do this? Did you actually start turning over and getting into some dope cases or some other neat stuff?
We did. We started working a lot of dope cases, and that kind of transitioned. And for me, then there was an opening in our investigations bureau in the major crimes, and so I put in for that. Ended up getting that, and I went to investigations and worked that for about 2 years.
How many years did you have on when you got that detective slot?
Yeah,
I was about 6. Which was unheard of back then.
Why is that?
That's not most guys. Time.
Yeah.
Just because of the time wise, most of the sergeants back then were 15 to 18 year guys before they'd get sergeant. And so I remember when I got it and I got promoted way young, and I went to my first sergeant meeting and they were all, making fun of me, telling me I still
coffee, boy. We need coffee.
Yeah, exactly. You still have a milk mustache. That type of stuff.
Well, I am looking at it over the camera. It is a little cheesy. I got to tell you, pal. You got to work on it.
Oh,
hey, this mustache. It's actually I got a buddy that's always trying to tease me. He's like, that's a fireman mustache. And I was like, that's an Old West sheriff mustache. There's a huge difference.
Hey, Morgan, you see how big he is. Our listeners, we can see each other on the videos here. He's a big boy.
Yeah, we're only separated by 2,000 miles, so I feel relatively secure right now.
Yeah, he might make a special trip over to Kansas next time you come to town. You never know,
Well, I'm in Virginia, Murph, remember.
Yeah, but you go to Kansas still allows you to come once a year, right?
Yeah, they do. Especially to go back and do my qualification. Keep my HR 218. Our card. So, but so you're the youngster. So, why is it that you got sergeant ahead of all of these other guys who are spending 15, 18 years? I mean, what do you think? Was it simply because you had that initiative that you're doing the performance, turning in the work, making a difference?
I think that's what it was. To make sergeant was a whole testing process. There was a written test. You had an oral interview board. You had to go through all these hoops to make it, and they'd score and grade you. And I just came out on top. It was the second time I tested. The first time I tested, I think I came out number 5 on the list, and everyone was like, "Oh, wow, what a fluke!" Again, kind of teasing me. And then the second time I tested, I came out on top. And like I said, all the older guys would, trying to make all these young jokes, and I'm like, listen, I can give shit right back. I would tell them, I'd be like, don't blame me that it takes me 6 years to do something it took you 18 to do.
Darn right. And that's the way it is in the cop culture. You got to give it right back to them.
That endears you. That endears you to the older guys too. Yeah. But the other thing too is, hey guys, go ask you don't like the results, go talk to the promotion board.
Yeah. And I was one of these guys all throughout my entire career, all my promotions, all my assignments. I've prided myself on the fact that, I wasn't always endeared by the administration. Sometimes I think they considered me a pain in the ass. But I prided myself on all of my promotions or transfers were hard work earned.
Yeah.
That was a big thing for me. I didn't want anyone to give me nothing.
Well, and if you're out doing a job, people are going to complain on you because they don't like being put in jail. But you're doing your job, and if you're doing it right, you got nothing to worry about.
Exactly.
If you make it through a law enforcement career with no complaints, you probably have not been doing your job right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
And because it's a fact, people can complain, and you know what? So quick sidebar. This is not a digression. This is a sidebar. A big difference. You can take this optional to take a drink. But no, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, they did a whole study around the use of in-car cameras and everything else because people will make complaints. And they started looking at it. And when they had the video recorded, with the in-car cameras, this is before the body cams, 90% of the time, the officer was absolved of any liability, was absolved of any wrongdoing. And not just that, well, it happened, but you don't do it again. It was like, it didn't happen. And so it's like, the thing is, you will get complaints doing your job. And so many of those were unfounded. I mean, a lot of people, the guys at NYPD used to call it sergeant in a box. It's like, no, it's not sergeant in a box. But really, most of the times when they got out there, you'd approach people, you say, look, this you're on audio and video, this traffic stop's being recorded. And people would still do dumb shit right in front of you.
Because people are
absolutely. Stupid. Yeah. As a supervisor, that guy, I think it got guys way more out of trouble than it ever got anyone into trouble.
And look, if you're doing something that got you into trouble, well, there's a piece of advice: don't do it.
Yeah, you knew. I think everyone knows the rules, so there's a difference between honest mistakes and guys that know better. So
right, and a lot of police officers, and I was probably like this as a young cop. You don't get complacent, but you probably think you're a little tougher or maybe more important than you really are. You're a public servant's what you are, and you're supposed to be serving the public. There's the title, right?
Yep.
And I think originally that's why we all got into law enforcement, was just to help others.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I did it because chicks digged uniforms, and
that's the side benefit, isn't it?
I know your wife, so I'm not going to say anything about it.
Well, but this is when I was single. But even when I was instructing later and teaching, new rookies and stuff, I said, remember, even if you're ugly and in uniform, there's a certain group of people that are still going to like you. So just keep that in perspective. Yeah. It's not you; it's the uniform.
Uniform.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So you started getting all these stats. You started getting promoted. So when you got promoted to sergeant, was that in investigations, or did you have to go back to patrol?
I had to go back to patrol. So I went back to patrol and ran a patrol crew. And then there was an opening for the sergeant in the narcotics unit. It's called Weber Morgan Narcotics Strike Force, which was always my goal. That was always my goal.
Where does the Morgan come from?
So there's a Morgan County, which is just to the east of Weber County. And Morgan is a very rural county. They have a sheriff's office, and that's it. And it's about 9 guys at the sheriff's office and no other law enforcement in the county. So they didn't have the resources or anything to do their own long-term drug type investigation. So they contracted with the strike force to do it for them.
Now, did that mean then you guys also had to get sworn in, with the other county? I mean, because you had authority for Weber County, but you didn't have authority in Morgan County, right?
No, in Utah, when you get sworn in, you are sworn in for the entire state. So even though I may be working in Weber County, I had law enforcement powers throughout the state.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. I mean, normally you carry either that or get a commission card, because that's the way it was, though, with city officers. Though, if you wanted to enforce laws in the county, were you able to do that, or did you have to have there's certain things you can do. You can make arrests when it's in front of you, but it's like if you're out there actually doing work, like to be on a task force, a lot of our guys usually had to get a commission card from the sheriff's office or the DEA task force. They would get credentials from them.
Yeah, we didn't. Like I say, the way that the law is written is you have the power. So, I mean, I could have, even when I was at the sheriff's office, I could go to Morgan if I needed to and help make an arrest. Now, obviously, there's unwritten rules and different things about working together and making sure that people are aware of what you're doing when you're in their areas. But you didn't have to have any type of a commission card or anything. You just could
They just don't want you to go poaching in somebody else's county without a little bit of a heads up, right?
Exactly.
Well, your sheriff's not going to be real happy if you're enforcing crimes in somebody else's county.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what are, unless it had some sort of a nexus to our county.
Yeah. So let's talk about that then. So you finally get to the task force, the strike force. So tell us, how's that composed? What do you got in terms of number of people? How do you guys develop your cases? Do you work with the Don't Expect Anything crew? I mean, I'm sorry, DEA.
Yeah. So the strike force was cool. It's a super coveted position. It's highly competitive, highly sought after to get into that unit. And it's a multi-jurisdictional agency, meaning it consists of law enforcement officers from all over the county. Different, you had all your different city police. Ogden City being one of them. There's other cities in Weber County. They would contribute manpower. The sheriff's office would contribute manpower. And then once you were selected for this assignment, you essentially left your home agency and would go and work narcotics. We didn't work out of a police department or the sheriff's office.
So you guys were kind of like your own entity in a sense.
Yes. Yep. We had our own budget, our own building, everything. So when you got that assignment, you left. And we typically would, so it was under the command of a lieutenant. And then you would have 2 sergeants and then anywhere between 9 to 12 different agents from the different police departments around. And then we would be cross-sworn. We had some guys that were cross-sworn with DEA, so we worked with the DEA, and we also had some guys that were cross-sworn as FBI. We had one guy that was cross-sworn to be on as an ATF agent, and then some marshals as well.
That's sweet. That's sweet.
Yeah, you got the cover. You used a term though. You said agents. So why is that a term of art? Because there are deputies, there's detectives, there's officers, but you said agents. Was that just because of the task force, or is that a Utah like statutory thing?
No, it's just the terminology used that once you went to the strike force, rather than a detective or anything, the term was always just agents, like narcotic agent.
Okay.
Yeah, because everybody wants to be an agent, Morgan.
Well,
Special agent.
Well, see, it was the FBI who coined that because J. Edgar didn't want to be just an agent, so he made all their guys special agents.
Yeah, they're special now.
There is our mandatory dogging of the FBI on the episode, so that's check. Right. We've completed that. Yeah. So we have to do state law. I'm sorry, state law in Virginia and in Florida. So
that's it.
So you guys started walking this. So when you first get on there, what kind of cases, what kind of things are you guys doing?
Pretty much we're responsible for all major drug crimes in Weber, and then obviously Morgan County, as I explained, that they would contract with us. So when I was talking earlier that we had that Sinaloa connection, that was primarily what we would do on a day-to-day basis is long-term, larger investigations, usually related to drug trafficking coming out of Mexico. And again, our cartel of choice was the Sinaloa cartel.
Were you guys doing wiretaps?
We did a lot of wiretaps, a lot of long-term type things. And then we had guys that specialized in the interdiction. Like I said, we had the highways. The I-15 is the main corridor that goes through Utah, goes all the way from southern Utah, all the way, continues through northern Utah. So we had guys doing interdiction. We would do wiretaps. We would do undercover stuff. I mean, kind of a mix of anything if it was narcotic related.
Just out of curiosity, where did your budget come from?
Primarily, we were getting grants from like HIDA.
There you go.
We also had a special tax that gave us a little bit of money per each individual in the county. It was a population type tax. And then Utah had some grants as well that we would get, but most of it was HIDA funded.
Is that the Rocky Mountain HIDA, or which one did?
Yeah, Rocky Mountain HIDA.
Okay.
Yeah, nice. I think that's part of too. Is that part of? So there's also a thing called ARMIN, the Rocky Mountain Information Network. There was part of the 7 information sharing, the RIFs, the Regional Information Sharing Project. So I think there's ARMIN and MOCIC, McLaughlin, all those different ones that are out there. So yeah, there's lots of money now. How much did seized assets play in terms of your funding?
They played a pretty big role, especially if we got a federal case. If we could take a case federally, then we would get a lot more of the federal seizure assets. Utah, a few years prior to me transferring down to the strike force, had changed their law, their seizure laws. It used to be you'd seize something, and what you seized essentially, once you went through the court process, that you could turn around and use that. And a bunch of there was kind of a libertarian type group got together. They didn't like that. They were, trying to make the argument that we would go out and the police were seizing things just simply because they wanted it or whatever. And, and so the law was changed to where if you seized it under a state case, that money went to the state, and then the state could turn around and divvy it up how they chose. So I guess the idea being that they thought they were taking away any type of an incentive to abuse it.
Yeah. And we saw DOJ, they lost their balls there for a while, and under whatever administration was in power at the time, and really restricted the asset seizures. And like we say on the show, as well as Javier and I say when we're doing our presentations, is if you want to hurt somebody, you put them in jail. If you want to make them cry, take their stuff.
That is the absolute truth. I mean, and I think that's everywhere. I used to tell everyone, I'd be like, some of these guys we'd get, they'd been in jail so many times they could care less. It was just another reunion with their buddies. But we took their Jeep. Holy shit! That was like a big deal. That we'd get people to flip for that. They'd be like, "I don't care about going to jail." And we're going to seize your Jeep. Hold on.
I'll tell you,
I know somebody.
And think about it. I mean, that's why they're into business to start with, is for all the money that could buy all the stupid things that they buy. Believe me, well, as well as
that was one of the great thing about our Kansas Department of Revenue folks. When we go out and do a case, our seizure laws were a little different. We were able to file and keep the majority of stuff. Mm-hmm. When I was on the state, though, anytime you see something, it went back to the state general fund, which is like you're talking about. You didn't go back to the agency. I think they've changed some of that now. But yeah, I remember great thing of going out with Kansas Department of Revenue agents. They would have the drug tax stamp law. So if you had a pound of marijuana, you had to have a tax stamp that basically equaled twice the price of what a pound would cost. Yeah. And if you didn't have that, they could seize that and then penalize it. So $1,000 of a tax of what you should have paid for became $10,000 in, I think, a liability. And so we were seizing big screen TVs back when they were coming out. We were seizing, like, say, pickup trucks. Where'd you get this couch? It's gone.
Yep.
We cleaned out one guy's house one time. By the time we got done, it says, "Hey, it's move-in ready for the next tenant." Everything was basically gone.
Hey, did you guys have representation from the Utah National Guard?
Yeah, we did. We had 2 intel analysts that were in there as well.
They are phenomenal. I mean, they had, when I was working in Special Operations Division with DEA back in D.C. and 100 years ago, they supported so many wiretap investigations because they have so many linguists who were missionaries out in the field. They're fluent in those different languages.
Yeah, that's the good thing about Utah is there's so many languages. I mean, any language. I mean, you'd pull over a car, it would be the strangest thing, and you'd get on the radio and you'd be like, "Does anyone speak Cantonese?"
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you'd hear some guy, "I do. I'll be right there."
Gotcha, boss.
And you're just like, "What the heck?" Okay.
I thought they were phenomenal. You know what? They were some of the best people to ever work with as well.
Yeah. We had 2 National Guard guys that were full-time analysts for us.
Yeah. Do you remember, Steve? I don't know if you remember this. Did you ever use this thing called the AT&T language line?
No, I know that Connie in their medical facilities that she's worked at had access to things like that. Maybe it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, it's sort of the thing. So AT&T would have this service, so you could call up, say, "Hey, I need a specific language," and they would put somebody on there. So I was interviewing somebody one night, and it was like a native dialect from like southern Peru. And it's like, we had all different languages we could have got to, but it's like, no, that one. So I'm on the line, and it's a drive-by shooting. It's a serious case. Somebody's wounded in the hospital, so I got to interview this person. 2 weeks later, lieutenant comes in. "Where's this $350 bill from AT&T for?" It was expensive. It was an hour, and it was $350.
Yeah, translation fees are expensive.
Oh my God! So after that, it was like, well, if they're only slightly injured, if it's only a flesh wound, we may not,
We'll try Mexican Spanish. If it doesn't work, oh well, we tried.
Yeah, that's right. We tried.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, we had one though too. We were fortunate though because it was like another like native dialect that came out of South America. They spoke that, but they could speak Spanish, but not English. So we found a guy who spoke that, who could then take the Spanish and then translate. So I'm speaking to the guy. He translates it from Spanish into the native dialect. They respond to him back in the native dialect. He translates it back to me. I mean, it was a convoluted thing, but it's like it took 4 hours to do what should have been a 30-minute interview.
You got to do what you got to do.
Got to do what you got to do. Man's got to do. Hey, that's what Josie Wales said, the outlaw Josie Wales. Man's got to do what a man's got to do.
That might be where I got that from. That's the best movie of all time.
Oh, that is.
Dying ain't much of a living, boy.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
You said that pretty good. That sounded pretty accurate there.
Yeah. Well, I like the one now. Was it 6 shots or was it 5? You see, well, I don't remember, but seeing this is a 44 Magnum, the world's most powerful handgun, and it'll blow your head clean off. You got to ask yourself one question, Punk. Do you feel lucky? Well, do you?
And to our listeners, I apologize. He's doing impersonations now. Holy cow.
That was not a digression. That was an impersonation. That does not count for the drinking game. So
if they tuned in right then, they might think you're interviewing Clint Eastwood.
There you go. There you go.
We'll have some, or that, or Sean Connery. Give me one ping for Sully. One ping only, please. All right, back to our that was back to our regularly scheduled podcast, but I digress. So I forgot, where were we, Nate?
I totally forgot too.
Oh, we're talking about
Utah
National Guard interpreters. You needed somebody who spoke Cantonese; they would have them there. Okay.
Yep.
See, we have fun on this show.
Now we're back on track. So let's start setting context now, because we're going to talk about the shooting you were involved in. So how long? So what we want to do is, first of all, book in this, because we want to make this an honor. We want to do this episode, dedicate it to the memory of Agent Gerald Daniel Francom, end of watch January 5th, actually 2012. He was shot on January 4th. 2012. Correct. With the Ogden Police Department in Utah. So we kind of want to bookend that, say that we're talking now January 4th, 2012 is where the shooting happened. So back us up in time. The other rule we have is we don't give any airtime to the piece of shit. So
I don't ever talk about his name.
No, we don't either. So then we're in sync. So we just refer to him simply as POS, piece of shit 1 or piece of shit 2. So since it's singular, we'll just say the POS. So let's start talking about
shitbird. I like shitbird.
I like shitbird, shithead, asshat.
Yeah, they all fit.
Yep. And we will talk. So we're not going to give this away, but there is a unique development to this case, Murph. So don't go anywhere, as they say. Let's start setting the context. So when did this shitbird piece of shit? When did this guy start coming onto your radar?
So primarily like I said, was saying, mostly what we were doing was cartel type stuff, and that was our focus. And we didn't really deal a lot with marijuana. Just wasn't a big deal. We didn't care about it. There's too much out there. We didn't really care. If we dealt with marijuana, it would be up in Morgan County, that rural county. We'd get these grows up there, 10, 15, 20, 25,000 plant grows, where it's a really remote county, and it would be cartel, where the cartels would come in and they would go and live up in these very, very remote areas and grow these huge plots of marijuana, live there all year long, cultivate it, and they would do this year after year. And typically we would get one of those, every fall. But if we were doing marijuana, those were the type of marijuana cases we did. But what happened is we had this tip line, and the tip line was an anonymous phone line that came into our office. And this was mostly for like your neighborhood nuisance type stuff, the neighbors doing this, everybody thinks their neighbors is cooking meth. Like everywhere you go, everyone, my neighbor's cooking meth.
Rule number 1 on the show, kids. What do we say? Don't do meth. That is rule number 1 on this show.
Most of the meth's actually coming from Mexico, but everyone thinks that. But anything like that, we had this anonymous tip line, and it was great because it was the type of stuff that, the mayors or the chiefs of police or the sheriffs were going to get their complaints about. So people could call in and leave tips. And in September of 2011, this gal calls in and she's like, "Hey, my boyfriend is growing weed." I don't know why, if she was mad at him or what, but she did the whole he got weed thing, that video. If you've ever seen the Chris Rock video, she calls in and she's like, "Hey, my boyfriend's growing weed. He's growing it in the basement. He's growing anywhere from 15 to 50 plants at a time. He'll harvest it a couple of times a year. He's getting 2 to 4 pounds and he'll sell it." And the tip comes in. Mostly that's one of the things that those National Guard analysts did was they would get those tips and type them up and send them off to the agents. And so when I went down to the strike force, I was one of the sergeants. I didn't even, this wasn't something that even would rise to my level. I didn't know anything about it. It was assigned to a guy named Jason Vanderwerf, and he gets it and reads it over, calls her, because on this particular one, she had left her name and number. So he calls her back and, hey, I'm just calling you. She gives him the same information. Hey, yeah, he's growing, gives the address in Ogden and kind of the same information. And he's like, okay, thanks. Puts it in a file and it sits on his desk. Because again, that's not our focus.
It's not a
That's
priority.
Not a priority at all. I mean, those types of cases were coming in all the time. So that was September 2011 when it came in, but we didn't actually get around to it till the end of the year in 2011. So, and what had kind of happened is, and still to this day, I think this is probably one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever pulled off in my career. I was able to convince our lieutenant, who was our commander over the strike force, that he needed to send the entire unit to Oahu to an undercover school.
Sweet.
Because yeah,
you're a hero.
Oh my God,
you're a hero in the unit now.
Yeah, that's what I told him. I'm like, LT, I was like, you cannot get quality undercover training on the mainland. You have to go to Hawaii. Everyone in law enforcement knows that the best undercover training's in Hawaii. I mean, that's just a fact.
And you sold this with a straight face?
Yeah, totally sold it with a straight face. I don't know. I don't remember. I've always kind of considered myself a little bit of a good bullshitter. I don't remember exactly what it was my
You're just
the selling point, but
you're just honing your undercover skills.
Exactly.
And Steve,
Exactly.
what did we learn from Guy Hargraves about? We was talking about the polygrapher. So this is a guy who actually used to polygraph people for the CIA.
Uh-huh.
One of the people that they had a hard time getting a good read on were undercover police officers.
Yeah, because they're so good at pulling this shit off.
Yeah.
I mean, this highly important training that you wanted.
Yeah, it was incredible training, and like we told the LT, you can't get it on the mainland. So not only did he send the entire unit, but we also convinced him that he needed to send everybody's wives as well.
Oh, wait a minute! You had pictures on this guy, didn't you? There is no way somebody's going to agree to all of this.
He did, and he's the only one that didn't end up going. He sent all of us, and he stayed back. He's like, "I'll man the shop. You guys go."
Wow.
So
you guys are still buying him free beers, right?
Pretty much. Again, I consider it one of my greatest achievements in my law enforcement career.
And that's saying something when you hear the rest of the stories too.
Oh, yeah.
So where'd you go when you said you went there? Where'd you go?
We went to Oahu. And we went to an undercover school he recently passed away. I love the guy. I don't know if you guys know him. His name was Charlie Fuller, one of Charlie Fuller's undercover schools. So went there, had a great time in Hawaii. I know that was about the 1st of December. I know we probably got there around the 6th or the 7th because we went to Pearl Harbor on Pearl Harbor Day. So I know we were there.
I've been there. That is an amazing. You take the boat ride over. And you're over there on top of the USS Arizona. And there's a story they talk about because it's still weeping oil. I mean, you'll see a little bit of oil come up.
Yeah, yep.
And they will say that will continue to weep oil until the last, I think, a member of the USS Arizona or the last World War II veteran dies. Because I was there when they did one of the services. They interred one of the shipmates. They took him down underwater and interred him in the Arizona.
Wow.
Yeah, that was amazing, and especially to be there on that day of all days, that was really cool. And I think we got home from Hawaii around probably December 15th ish. And
no, wait a minute, hold on. You bypassed too much stuff. You just don't get to do a week in Hawaii and not tell us. Okay, come on.
All right.
Was it the best undercover training you ever had, or did you not care?
Well, we didn't care that much, but it probably was the best for any administrators listening. It is the best training in the country, and you have to send your guys there.
We got to charge for that one. There's an ad for that. Now, had you ever been to Hawaii before?
No, I hadn't, and so I actually, I took my son. Most of the guys took their wives, but I had a little guy. He was 10 at the time, and so I took him, and he was kind of, I had 3 kids. He was my middle son. He was kind of adopted by the strike force. He was like the mascot. Like he just loved the guys, and we were a really close unit. To get down there, again, it's very coveted, and they only want to take the best of the guys around, the best investigators around the county. And when you get down there with guys like that you work well with, that have the same mentality, that want to get out there and get after it, you become real close. And that's what happened with our unit. We were all friends. We became, I knew everyone's kids, I knew everyone's wives. We would barbecues and obviously train together, and so my son went with us, and that was a lot of fun.
That's cool. And you know what, that greatly reduces the alcohol consumption when you have a 10-year-old with you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it did for me. It didn't for anyone else, but
you can live
totally
vicariously through their drinking.
Well, now they have the responsibility of drinking yours portion as well. So I mean, you really put a burden on them.
I put them in a tough spot. So,
and I got to tell you too, when I was there too, some of the best food I had was the pineapples and stuff that came right off the plantations.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, that tasted so good.
Mm.
Yeah, and the Hawaii guys, the Hawaii cops were so accommodating and took such good care of us, because I don't think they got a ton of guys. I remember there was a part of the email, the training that was sent out, that I found, and it said, we challenge any mainlanders to come out to this training. And so when we got there, we're like, hey, we accepted your challenge, we're here. And they took us under our wings, and I mean, they took us to luau's. They did all kinds of
nice
of fantastic stuff for us, and some of them I still know to this day.
So did you get laid?
They do every time you get there. My son did too. He got laid as well as soon as you get off the airplane.
Oh Lord, we might want to explain this.
Thank you very much.
We might need to explain that for some of our listeners.
So lays, LAIs. So they call it when you come off the plane, or they used to do it too. They would put a lei around you so you got laid.
Thank you.
Yeah, a little flower necklace type thing.
Sorry, you know what, Nate? I'm not so sure it was a good thing pairing you up with Morgan here.
My mind works in different ways, Murph.
And Nate's right there with you. That's what's worrying me.
Yeah. Yep. No, but we had a good time. Some funny stories coming out of Hawaii. So the hotel we stayed in was this huge tower, because if you've ever been to Honolulu, it's this massive skyscrapers, and one of the hotel we were at was one of them. And I remember Vanderwerf was wanting to screw with Jared, and because we all had our own rooms, but we were scattered throughout the hotel, different levels. And Jared goes walking into his room one night, and Vanderwerf's laying in his bed. Couldn't figure out how he'd got in there, and it turns out Vanderwerf had jumped from balcony to balcony to balcony down to get into his room. I mean, just crazy, stupid stuff.
Was alcohol involved?
100%, which probably made him, limber enough to actually pull it off.
I got to tell you a quick story. We spoke at a law enforcement
True confessions on Game of Crimes.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what state it was, but it wasn't one of the bigger states, or at least the area we were in speaking to wasn't major cities. And so the hotel was where they have this law enforcement conference every year, and it was either gang or narcotics investigators. And it's an old embassy suites, and you know how the middle part is open? And apparently, once you reach a certain alcoholic level, the rappellers come in and rig their lines, and people are rappelling from the top floor down into the lobby, and they're having races to see who can get down the quickest, and the other guests are checking out.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, there is nothing like a narcotics conference in terms of a party. That is a party. You put a bunch of narcotics cops together in a hotel, and there is some stories.
And see, you just wanted to bypass that. Yeah, we were in Hawaii for a week, and it's like, no. One thing we've always found is it's not the blah, blah, blah. We rewind a little bit. See, look at the stuff we pulled out of you. So
That's true. I mean, we had a great time. I mean, it was a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Have you ever been to the Utah Narcotics Conference?
Yeah. That was kind of a mainstay for us. We love that. That was back when I was in it. It was in September, usually the first week of September. Yep. And so by then, you'd gone 9 months working cases, and guys were ready to blow off steam. And they held it at a casino just right outside in Nevada, just right on the border.
Yep. Hunter and I spoke at that about 5 or 6 years ago, and we thought,
Yeah, I remember
why are
hearing.
we in Nevada if this is a Utah conference? And it was the
Yeah,
casino.
because the party aspect, guys want to go and blow off some steam, and so
And
so
obtain
that's what it
alcoholic
is.
beverages, which is tough to do in the Utah region, some of those
Yeah,
regions.
yep, and and it's not the same. But 5 years ago, Utah's alcohol content in their beer was lower than everywhere else in the country. Believe it or not.
That's
What,
not
y'all
beer. It
can't
doesn't
handle?
qualify as beer then. I'm sorry.
You guys can't handle
Yeah,
any liquor out there, or what?
well, that was by the state law. They made it 2% lower than everywhere else. So yeah, so so guys were always wanting to go to Nevada to get beer because you know you had to drink twice as much in Utah.
Well, hey, I've got some good Belgian beers some of them are 10 to 14%. You only need one of those. So,
Yeah, that would be highly coveted here in Utah.
oh, wait a minute. I got a new idea for a business. Okay.
It's called smuggling.
Smuggling.
Exactly.
It's not smuggling when you legally obtain the contraband.
Hmm.
So
It is if you're bringing it into a state where it's banned.
it's not illegal to bring beer into Utah. It's just illegal to sell it in Utah.
Oh, so you're going to give it away?
No. I can't. I'm not going to
It's
tell
not
you everything, you cop. Come on.
it's not a great business plan if you're going to give it away.
We'll get what was the bandit? Smoking the bandit. That's what's
Yeah.
going to happen
Yeah.
here.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. All right. So that was a digression that you can blame Murph on that. So back to our regularly scheduled podcast. That's drinking.
That's like my
number
first.
3.
That's like
Yeah.
my first.
All right. So we were talking about, so you come back from this. So like you said, it kind of sat on the shelf. So what made you resurrect it after you came back from the conference? Was it the fact that you had just gone through this training, or did something else come up?
No, so most of the guys when we got back from Hawaii wanted to take some time off for the holidays, spend with their family. We got back, like I say, the 15th or 16th, somewhere around there of December. Christmas is coming up. So guys naturally were just like, you know what, we worked so hard that they didn't get their vacations during the year. And so a lot of people would be sitting on use or lose. It happened every year. So guys were like, hey, I'm going to burn my vacation down. I'm going to take some time off for Christmas, which is what pretty much everyone did. So the unit pretty much shut down that month of December between Hawaii and the holidays. So it's about the last week of December, somewhere probably around the 28th or so of December. I came into work. Most of the guys were still on vacation, but as I came in, there was 2 guys, Jason Vanderwerf and another guy named Sean Grogan. It's probably about 1:00 in the afternoon, and they were putting on some gear to identify themselves as police, like jackets, raid stuff, type stuff. So I asked them. I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And they said, "Oh, we're going to go catch up on all of these. We call them T cases or tip cases from the hotline that came in. We're going to go catch up on a lot of our T cases that have been sitting here that we've, basically
Just
kind of
couldn't
been
get to.
neglecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, couldn't get to. And without having the whole team there to do some of the bigger things that we would do, this was a perfect time to go out and kind of catch up on those. So I said, hey, I'll jump in with you. Let me go grab my stuff. So I went and geared up as well, put on everything to show that we're police officers, because a lot of times we were undercover. We had the long beards and different things like that. But so we gear up, jump in one of the cars and we start driving. And I said, hey, where are we going to first? And Vanderwerf says, well, I have this case that this guy's supposedly growing weed in his basement. And he tells me the details, came in September and all the details we talked earlier, a couple of 15, 20, 30 plants in his basement. He's harvesting it and so on. So the plan is we would head up to the house. We're dressed as police. We're trying to be police, and we're going to do what's called a knock and talk, where essentially you just go up, you make contact with the suspect, and you talk your way into the house, and get him to just basically give you your drugs, give you his drugs without having to get like a search warrant or anything like that. We're just talking him out of his drugs.
And before we go any further, I know you've researched this guy. Does he have a criminal background? Does he have anything
No,
bad?
not at all. He has no criminal history at all. We knew that he had a firearm. He had purchased a firearm, but I mean, this is Utah, and I mean specifically Ogden. Ogden has a long history of firearms. Everybody in Utah has a firearm. John Browning, the great gun inventor, Browning Firearms is here. He was from Ogden. So that was not a red flag at all. I mean, everyone has a gun. He had no criminal history. I think he had a traffic ticket. It was all. So we go up to the house. The plan is again to identify ourselves as police, talk to him, say, hey, you can't do this, kind of a no, and take his plans. We would never have arrested him, never would have taken him to jail, nothing like that. Get to the house. Again, it's probably 1:30 in the afternoon. Sun's out. It's bright. We're dressed as police. We knock on the front door. And I remember Vanderwerf knocked and he starts calling out. He's like, hey, it's the police department. That's how we would identify ourselves. We would never be like, hey, it's the strike, too confusing. So we would just knock and say, hey, it's the police department. Can you come to the door? We need to talk to you. And the house, the blinds were drawn, so you couldn't see in the front of it at all. Couldn't see any movement. We knocked for a couple of minutes trying to get someone to come to the door. Nobody did. Well, there was a carport on the south side of the home, and there was a door at the carport as well. So we moved over to the carport, and we start knocking on that door, thinking, okay, well, maybe he'll hear it better from this door. So same thing, knocking on the door. Hey, it's the police department. We just need to talk to you. Can you come to the door? And we got no response. But the interesting thing about this door was there was a window in it. It was a wooden door, but there was a window, and so you could see into the home. And as you looked in that window, there was like a little 4x4 foot landing. And then there was 4 stairs leading up to the left that you could tell went into like a kitchen area. And then there was about 10 stairs that led straight down into the basement of this home. It's kind of a cottage style home. And as you look into the basement was completely unfinished, but there was a room that had been kind of put in down there, obviously makeshift after the fact, done up with like plywood and stuff. And it had a door on it that didn't fit real well. And you could see all these power cords running from the basement into this room. And the basement itself was dimly, there was no lights on it. It was somewhat dark. And you could see a ton of light coming out from under this door of this room. And then as you start looking around, we start seeing things and we're pointing them out to each other. You see these long sticks, long grow sticks. And we start to see different empty chemicals down there, like plant type chemicals, fertilizers, things like that. You can see different venting. And then there was a garbage can next to us right at that same door. And the lid it's one of the city-owned garbage cans, a big plastic garbage can, and the lid, flops down and flops up. Well, the lid was flopped back, so you could see into the garbage can. I mean, so legally where we're standing, you can see into the home. You can also see into the garbage can.
Inside baseball kind of term, that's called in plain view. In other words, you had a right to be where you were. You saw something in plain view. Now, had you lifted up the lid of the garbage can and looked in, some lawyer probably would have correctly argued that was a violation of Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, privacy, because it was on the property. But if it's in plain view,
exactly.
And you can't say, "Oh, we tripped and fell and knocked the garbage can over, and then the lids, mysteriously opened up." You guys were too smart for that. But Murph, we call these things clues. Those are called clues.
Hey, and Nate, before you go any further, so just to back up a second, when you're seeing a dimly lit basement with multiple extension cords going in and bright light behind that door, explain to our listeners what you think you're seeing there.
I think it's a porn shoot. I don't know what you think of this. I think it's a porn shoot.
Well, that's what troopers will be doing, but an experienced narcotics investigator.
Yeah, we knew that the tip that we had, which was that he was growing marijuana in the basement, all of those led to, okay, that is in fact what's going on. You could tell that was a grow room. All that light, the way that these people will set up their grows is there's a couple of different ways. One is a hydroponic grow where they have a watering type system and the plants are in the water, but the plants need a lot of sunlight. They have to have that, and so they'll have these specific lights that they use that are very high powered lights. Hits
Consume a lot of
tons of
electricity.
electricity, which is
Yeah.
always another clue when you have a house that is consuming way more energy than its neighbors. But yeah, so all those types of things. And when you looked into the garbage can, we could see different venting and different packaging and things like that also showed that there was a marijuana grow. You put it all together, and it was pretty obvious that the tip was credible, that the information that she had gave us was, in fact, there was a grow
Very
down
good.
there.
And I appreciate you explaining it, because not everybody knows about indoor grows and the artificial suns and so forth.
Yeah. So we knew one was there. Again, knowing one was there, and with the level of what this case was compared to what we would do on a day-to-day basis, still wasn't that big of a deal to us at all. I mean, it's a very, very minor thing. Didn't make any contact with anyone, so we left. Later that night, one additional guy had came into work, but most everyone else was still off on vacation. This guy's name was Derek Draper, and Derek came in. It was probably about 7:00 at night. So that time of year in Utah, December 28th, it's dark by now. And he comes over the radio, and he calls over to Jason Vanderwerf, the guy, the agent that had the tip, and he says, "Hey, that house you were telling me about that you tried to do a knock and talk on, that there's a grow in the basement." He's like, "I just drove by it, and there's some lights on inside the home now. Do you guys want to come back and try to do a knock and talk again?" And under law, we're allowed to approach and make contact with homeowners anywhere between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. So we were within our legal time to do it. So we went back over to the house. Draper was waiting there for us, and we pull up, and again, you had the driveway leading up to the house, and then there was from the driveway a little sidewalk that veered off to the front porch, and then you had the front porch, and then you had two big bay windows on each side of the front door, and the one on the right side was lit up, and the blinds were still drawn, but the light was on in the house, which was obviously a change of what it was before, because there was no lights on when we were there earlier in the day. So Draper and Vanderwerf do the same thing. Again, they're still dressed as police. They have all their jackets and hats and things that said they're police, and they go up to the front door, knock on the door, and same thing. "Hey, it's the police department. Need to talk to you. Can you come to the front door?" And they wait, and I'm waiting more at the end of the driveway. There's actually a church across the street, and I was actually over there just watching the whole thing, waiting for them to make contact, and then I would have walked up. But I'm also watching the house to see if I can see any movement at all, shadows or anything like that. And I don't see anything. I don't see any movement. They continue to knock and don't get a response, and so do the same thing. They move over to that carport door. Same thing. They knock. "Hey, it's the police department. Come to the door. We need to talk to you." And no response. So we left again. And then over the course of that next week leading up to January 4th, we went back an additional 3 times. So a total of 5 times we went back. And each time it was the same. We're dressed, obviously police. We're identifying ourselves as police, knocking on the door, just trying to handle this very, very low key. I mean, 99% of the time when we would get these types of cases, we could handle them all the same. You knock on the door, the homeowner answers. "Hey, can we come in and talk to you?" They invite us into the home. Then once we're in the home, we explain to them, "Hey, we're here because of this. We've got information. If you can work with us, we can work with you." 99% of the time, they're like, "Yeah, it's in the basement." They take us down there. We would have taken his plants and dismantled the grow to a certain extent, and told him he can't do it. And he may have received a ticket. He may not have, just depending on how he acted.
What's the line between getting a ticket and getting arrested?
Typically, for us, if it was like the serious nature of it, I mean, if we're dealing with large quantities of drugs, then you're probably going to get arrested. Where this one was more of a smaller scale thing, it just wasn't something that rose to high up on our radar or high up on, I mean,
Well, you got a lot of cases going on. It's like if this thing doesn't have the weight or the connections to the cartel related stuff, it's like, guys, there's only so much money, time, and people. I think a lot of people think, well, can't you make every case? No, you can make any case. You can just can't make every case, and
Exactly.
you have to pick and choose which
Yeah,
cases you make.
every case, especially once, when you figure once you make the arrest, that case is now just starting. You got the whole court process you got to go through. You've got to work with the county attorney's office to successfully see this case through. And I mean, and that can take years on.
It's time
Yeah, and
consuming.
so
Yeah.
limited resources, limited budgets, limited everything. You had to pick and choose which ones were the more serious and which ones were the ones that you could basically kind of slap on the wrist and say, don't do this no more. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was, and we'd get a ton of tips. We'd get a ton of tips through that tip line, and that's how a lot of them went. Maybe they'd get a ticket, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe we would settle for them passing on some information. I mean, that's typically how the dope game works. Is you get someone, they're typically small. You're like, hey, you don't have the time or the resources to deal with them, but you want to at least get something out of it, and aside from discouraging them from doing it again. So you also try to say, hey, what information can you provide to us that moves us up the chain and gets us someone that's bigger or more serious or a bigger threat to the community? And so a lot of times we would just settle for that. Someone would say, well, I know a guy, you get a guy with a small amount of dope, an 8-ball, which is an eighth of an ounce of say meth, and you say, okay, well, well, I know a guy that has a half ounce of meth. Okay, so then you pop him, and he's still not big. And well, what can you do? Well, I know a guy that has 2 ounces of meth, and that guy, oh, I know a guy that has a pound, and you kind of go from there. Uh, exactly, and so that's typically how we would handle these. That's certainly how we would have handled this if we would have got him to answer the door.
But he didn't answer the door.
He did not, and so that moves us into the first of the year. That 2012, January 4th was a Wednesday, so it put the New Year's on Sunday. So everybody was still off on Monday for the holiday. Most of the guys. So that would have been January 2nd, but they had it because the holiday fell on a Sunday. They were off anyway, so the guys got to burn their holiday day on Monday, and then school was starting up on Tuesday to get the kids back in school. So a lot of guys wanted to take off that day to get their kids into school. So we didn't really have our full team back until January 4th. And I remember, so I wake up on January 4th, and one of the things that we had that kind of made us real successful. I hadn't talked about this, but the strike force started in 1989, the Weber Narcotics Strike Force. And it's kind of funny, you get all these guys down there, you get great investigators, and it's a coveted spot. And what happens is everybody has A-type personalities. Guys like to work, and it becomes very competitive. And you always hear guys that are, my group, or when I was down there, that was the best group. There'll never be a group that was as good as that group, type of a mentality. We were the best. And it's funny the way these specialty assignments work. I don't think they plan it this way, but the way that you transfer in and out of the unit, typically it feels like the whole unit kind of transfers out relatively about the same time, and you get a whole new crop of guys coming in. And that's what happened to us. So when I went down there, most of the guys were fairly new, and so we kind of learned together. Well, in like 2010 and 2011, we had record-breaking years. I mean, we broke all the records for drugs, guns seized, arrests, search warrants, all that type of stuff. And I remember that was kind of our focus. Is we were like, man, we're this kick-ass group. Look, we're the best, and everyone else before us is going to say they're the best group, but we have the stats to prove it. And that was kind of our focus. I mean, guys were just producers. I mean, the whole unit. So on January 4th, I remember coming into work, and one of the keys to our success, we had cultivated this informant, and he was a Mexican national, actually from Mexico, with a naturalized citizen of Mexico, and he was a mercenary. Which, what that means is, he wasn't working because we had charges on him. He was working for money. So essentially this is his full-time gig. And we would call him, I'm sure, Murph, you probably call them the same. They were just mercenaries. They're doing it for money. And this guy was good, and he could get into the Sinaloa cartels up here. I mean, he would go to the bars or to the cockfighting events, the chicken fighting or the horse races, all these things that are part of the narco culture of these cartels. And he was very, very good, and he played the role well, and he fed us a lot of intel, and he was kind of the secret to a lot of our success on some of these record-breaking cases. Well, when we took that whole month of December off, he wasn't working, and I remember he was really kind of pushing us, like, guys, I need to work, I need to be making money, like, come on, I got big things. And we kept putting him off. Hey, we'll get to it. We don't have our full team. We'll get to it. So Tuesday night, he had kind of was pushing us. Hey, I got some stuff. We can do some things. And we kind of were pushing him off. We said, hey, let's do it tomorrow, Wednesday. We'll have our full team back then. So that was kind of going into Wednesday. So, I woke up. Wednesday was a total typical normal day. I think everyone always assumes that you can kind of feel something coming, or maybe the sun is more ominous, or their hair on the back of your neck, something telling you something bad's going to go down soon. It wasn't.
This was just another search warrant, another raid, and one of hundreds or thousands you guys had done.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, we hadn't even planned the raid yet. I mean, we woke up, we had planned on doing this stuff with that informant later. And then when I got to the office, Steve Zaccardi was in there. Funny thing about Steve is when we got back from Hawaii, Steve Zaccardi was the other sergeant, and he was from the Ogden Police Department. And when we got back from Hawaii, Steve had gone in and had rotator cuff surgery on his shoulder. And, typically when you have some sort of an injury or surgery, you go on light duty. And typically when you're on light duty, you're supposed to go back to your home agency to work the front desk, which nobody wants to do, especially guys that are like to get after it and
Well, if you go work the front desk and got to be back in uniform, it means you got to cut your hair and get cleaned up.
And not only that, but the thing about the strike force is you left your home agency and went to the strike force. You didn't want to go back. I mean, this was if you were a strike force guy, this is what you wanted to do for your career. And anytime you went back to your home agency and the administration, the sheriff or the chief would see you, it reminded them that you existed. And suddenly they'd start to be like, wait a minute, Nate, how long have you been at the strike force? Isn't it time for you to transfer to something new? So, and I had a standard answer. I would always be 18 months. No matter how long I had been down there, no matter how many years, I'd always say 18 months. I felt that was to say that, hey, I've been down here. If it seems like it's been a while, it's because it's been 18 months, but it hasn't been that long, so don't transfer me out. But
it sounds like a Seinfeld episode, something like Costanza or Kramer would do, Yeah.
Exactly. Well, you got to do what you got to do to stay in that position as long as you can. And Zaccardi knew, he's like, if I go back to the front desk, they're going to remember I exist. And I don't want to do that. And so we were like, well, just do light duty at the strike force. And he's like, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll do light duty down here. So he was kind of on light duty. And I remember I come in on that Wednesday morning. It's a Wednesday like every other morning. And as I get into the office, go back to Steve and I shared a sergeant's office. We get in there and we're talking about how the whole team's supposed to be back to work that day. And I said, why don't we throw a lunch meeting? You and I buy lunch for all the guys, get everybody back and kind of get everybody refocused and for the year. And so we sent out a text, told everyone to be at the office at a specific time, and we were buying lunch, and the whole unit showed up.
So let's talk about this infamous lunch meeting.
Yep. So we sent this text out. All the guys show up. First time that the unit's kind of been back to work since the Hawaii trip. And we had a great meeting. And specifically in the meeting, we set our goals for 2012. And to kind of put you in the mindset of how that meeting was going, I talked a minute ago about these record-breaking 2010 and 2011 years where we were just really kicking ass. And as the guys, Steve and I, the other sergeant, we just sat back and we're like, hey, you guys come up with what you guys want to do this year in terms of goals. These guys were putting together some crazy lofty goals. And I remember, talking to him, and I'm like, man, that's, those are some crazy numbers. Are you sure that's what we want? I mean, I'm not sure that that's achievable. And they're like, nope, this unit can do it. We got a great group of investigators here. And so that was kind of the meeting. It was this really upbeat, positive meeting. Everybody realized that we had, had some time off of work. Everybody had kind of screwed off for the month of December, and they were back ready to work, and they were back ready to get after it. So the meeting breaks up. I mean, just a really positive meeting. And Steve and I go back to the sergeant's office, and Jason Vanderwerf comes in, and he's like, hey, that house that we've been trying to do a knock and talk on? I'd like to do a search warrant. And I know that we got stuff going later, but I'd like to get this search warrant knocked out so I can close that case, because I can't get anyone to answer the door. So we said, yeah, let's do it. He had applied for a search warrant, and it had been approved.
Did you pull any of the utility data to go with that?
We didn't. We were going strictly off of the tip plus everything that we had seen.
Plain view.
The observation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And felt we had plenty of probable cause, and obviously the judge agreed with this and issued a warrant. The warrant was a daytime knock and announce warrant, meaning it had to be served during daytime hours, which is between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. And it's a knock and announce, meaning we have to go up and knock on the door and announce that we're police and there to serve a search warrant, versus another type of warrant that a lot of times is used in the narcotic world would be a no-knock warrant, where you can ram the door and just head in, and that's probably what people see a lot of times on TV.
But for that, because a lot of states have changed that because of certain incidents that happen, but to get a no-knock, you actually have to establish now another level of proof, which is, the suspect's armed, or, he's a danger to the public, et cetera, before you can even get there's one thing about getting the warrant, then if you want no-knock, that's like another step you have to take, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That's exactly how it is. And so, yeah, you have to present more evidence to show that there's a need for it to be a no-knock. We didn't even attempt to. We weren't trying for that. I mean, this is it's a marijuana grow. We weren't necessarily worried about him being able to destroy evidence. It's not like he's going to be able to go and flush the grow. So, so we got it. We had been to the house many times.
But that's the point I want to ask you, that you guys have been to the house 5 times. Either this guy didn't get the message, or he's stupid, because if the cops had been to my house 5 times, I got to figure at some point you're coming back with a warrant. Either he's too, I'm thinking like, let me get rid of this stuff. But apparently he didn't. Hey players, that is the end of part 1. Part 2, as always, comes out on Thursday. In the meantime, check us out at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook, at the Instagram. But where you got to be, got to be on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We have a ton of good stuff, including, if you are at the right level, Guardian of the Realm and Warden of the Throne, we have just released part 1, episode 1 of The Real DEA Narcos, talking about the real DEA Narcos, Cali edition. Chris Feistel and Dave Mitchell go in depth, 16 hours, about how they took down the Cali cartel. Information you will not hear anywhere else in the world, not on Netflix, not anywhere, not in a book, only right here on Game of Crimes at patreon.com/Game of Crimes. In the meantime, also go check out our webpage, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got the latest merch, pictures for every episode that we put up, books that our guests write. We only put up books that they write. We put them up there. So we thank you once again for being a player in the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.